God, indie games get so much hate. That whole history behind, Hello Neighbor and MadPat and yeah, Tiny Bill and MadPat. I don't know what's going on between them two. I did see this. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't. It's just it's giving desperate. A lot of horror games now, they are kind of copying the formula of FNAF. It's really unfortunate to see Hello Neighbor just take that downwards turn. They just haven't been executing these games well. Hey everyone, it's Bree. Welcome back to my channel. I'm back with another video, and we're going to be reacting to why Hello Neighbor eventually failed. I want to know this as well. For those of you who are big gamers, and for those of you who are really big in the indie community, this was a really big indie game that came out years ago. I don't know the year that it came out off the top of my head, but if you know, you know. Literally everybody was playing this. All the big YouTubers were playing this game. Smaller YouTubers were playing this game. Hello Neighbor had literally took over the indie game scene for a while, and with their games, like, they would always come up with multiple versions of it. They had a lot of alpha builds that people played, and then eventually they had other iterations. They had what was it called? There was like a Hello Neighbor game that had came out that was supposed to be like a prequel, I think. And then you had Hello Guest, and then you had Hello Neighbor 2. And those last two games that they came out with, they didn't do so well. Especially Hello Neighbor 2. I was very, very shocked and surprised that Hello Neighbor 2 didn't do well, because the first Hello Neighbor did so well. So I'm shocked that it didn't get a lot of traction on YouTube. I think I only saw like maybe one or two people play it, and even I didn't feel that inclined to watch it, because there was like no hype around it whatsoever. And yeah, I don't know, because I know like a lot of the times when these indie games come out, especially when they're coming out with sequels, sometimes they'll reach out to YouTubers to play their game, sometimes paid or not paid. And so I wonder if the company kind of dropped the ball with getting the marketing together for Hello Neighbor 2. But also, I know there's a lot of drama going on as well with the creator. But anyway, I'll get into all that after the video, because I don't know what this video is going to cover. But yeah, let's just hop right into it.
However, you also were probably...
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry.
There we go. Hello Neighbor is a game that you're all familiar with and most likely at some point even enjoyed. However, you also were probably part of the mass amount of people who nowadays have a modern hatred towards the title.
Oh,
and
no.
So today I wanted to go through both the problems with the game as a whole that made it such an unlikable concept.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't feel this way. I don't hate the game. But that's another thing too that I noticed with indie games. Like, God, indie games get so much hate. Like, it's like when the game first comes out and first has that initial attraction online, there is a lot of positivity. But I feel like as time goes on, the fans just like, I don't know, it's weird. It's almost like you have this subset of people that hate anything that gets popular and gets a lot of attention, and so they just hate the game. Like, I literally see this with every single indie game that comes out and does well. It's like eventually they end up I don't want to say going on a decline or a downfall, because they still have people that play their games, but like you'll see the shift in like the comments and like the community surrounding those games. It's like they just get so negative. They start trashing the game. They'll start saying, oh, dead game, it fell off. Literally almost every single one. FNAF is one of them. Even though FNAF is making a resurgence and most people still enjoy that franchise, you'll still have people that say that about FNAF. You have that with Among Us. You have that with Fall Guys. Fall Guys get so much hate for no reason. And like the developers of the game, like they didn't even do anything, but people just hate Fall Guys now for some reason, and they just get so much hate, and it's just, But Hello Neighbor is the same thing. It's like, you know, Hello Neighbor gets so much hate. It's crazy.
And also how internet culture has seemingly gone against the game in recent years, playing a reverse effect on tinyBuild's initial plans to build an internet community to support them.
That's crazy.
Or basically, this is why Hello Neighbor failed. Hello Neighbor is a game developed by the team at this point named Dynamic Pixels and was released by tinyBuild.
Yeah, I would say tinyBuild.
The premise of the game was pretty simple from the start. You play as the neighboring house to a mysterious neighbor down the street who clearly seems to be hiding something inside of his basement. The goal of the player is to enter the home and discover what is inside by solving puzzles to unlock the keys on the door.
I used to love... I'm sorry. This is bringing me back. I used to love watching people play this game, especially Dashie. Oh my god, it's bringing me back. Because Hello Neighbor, like... It's rare for games to actually, like, get me scared like that. I don't know. For some reason, the way that Hello Neighbor is set up and, like, the angles, like, I would always be so anxious wondering where the neighbor was.
Codes. The selling point of this pretty basic cat and mouse style game was the AI itself, because the neighbor was able to learn over time.
Yeah.
And while the game may start off with a simple window break or backdoor entrance, it would evolve over time, requiring more creativity when the neighbor starts taking extra precautions with every failed attempt. The game almost immediately had an explosive start from the moment it was released in just its pre-alpha. The alpha was pretty much just a test demo for a lot of the game's mechanics, and it was pretty rough to say the least. But of course, with it just being a pre-alpha, that's not really a big deal. And you could actually say at first it worked in tinyBuild's favor, because the reason that this game got so popular initially was because so many YouTubers and other content creators started playing the game for entertainment. And while of course the game looked fun and showed a lot of potential, it was honestly pretty entertaining from a viewer aspect to watch the game bug out, because it made everything way more unpredictable. But as mentioned, this game out of the gate had a ton of success from these content creators.
Yes.
And right from the pre-alpha, it was a pretty dang popular game. I'll try to avoid this being a glorified history of Hello Neighbor video and just summarize that from this point forward, the game would naturally develop throughout the alphas.
The alpha
and
builds,
as everything was developing, the reputation of this new game was actually beginning to rise quite significantly. The game obviously stayed buggy, but the developers were testing the neighbor in different homes, environments, and with different puzzles to enter the basement. Its quality was obviously increasing throughout the alphas, but something that stayed the same with every release was that we never truly found out what was in the basement. So naturally, as time progressed, the mystery of the game increased more and more, allowing for some actual lore to be developed alongside the excitement for the gameplay. However, at this point, things would slightly start to turn against the Hello Neighbor team, mostly around the time when the game is in its later alphas and early betas. The reason for this is because after all of the Alpha 2 hype, the next test map in Alpha 3 was basically just gonna be some obnoxiously abstract large house. And a problem was seen right out of the gate with this house, because they tossed an AI originally being developed for a one-story small house into this big mega mansion that it clearly wasn't designed for. And speaking of things not designed correctly, with the home being so big, this alpha put more focus than ever on parkour-based elements, those of which were things that were heavily criticized in other alphas, as the physics of the game just plain out sucked. By the way, follow me on Instagram and DM me your thoughts on this video. I respond to most. So Alpha 3 was really the first taste in the negativity for the Hello Neighbor team. But for one reason or another, this massive house was by far the team's favorite, because when Alpha 4 came out, the same exact house was used. And in fact, throughout every single beta release leading up to the final game, this same Alpha 3 map was used, and realistically, people weren't very happy about this. But putting the betas aside, the game of course would start developing, and after a delay or so, it would actually end up getting released. But from this point forward is when things would get really bad. So essentially the game would be divided into 3 parts or acts, not including the final boss. And at first things seemed pretty good, because the first 2 acts actually involved the previously used fan favorite Alpha 2 house, which was seemingly redeeming. However, by Act 3, which was the majority of the game, we were back in the fan hated massive house. And for reasons
I must have missed that, because I didn't know people hated the house that much like that. That definitely went over my head.
Since I'll discuss in a moment, that combined with a bunch of other factors made the final version of this game pretty hated by critics. But what exactly went wrong? Well, honestly, the concept itself of the game was actually pretty good, but oh my goodness, I don't think this game idea could have been executed any worse at all. My first problem with the game has to be the actual neighbor himself. You know, the one in the title of the game, Hello Neighbor. He's just terrible at doing his own job. The goal of the neighbor is meant to be pretty simple. He's supposed to come after you whenever he sees you, and that's where the sneak survival part of this game is supposed to come in, because we need to avoid the neighbor to beat the game, of course. He's supposed to be the punishment for not doing things right, and is the antagonist that we need to survive from. But here's the problem. His AI that is responsible for the flow of the entire game is absolutely dreadful. I mentioned when talking about the first couple of alphas that the neighbor was pretty good to an extent. I mean, sure, he was still sort of annoying because he was such an aggressive character and was more than happy to ruin all of your progress by boarding up a window you needed, but I feel like those aspects were in good nature of the game and they made it pretty fun. What isn't fun at all, though, is in the newer alphas and betas where the neighbor did just two things. He placed cameras and he chased mindlessly. The premise of the original couple parts of the game is that we were supposed to sneak around his home, and if we ever needed to distract him or have him move into a different area, we could do things like start up an alarm clock that he'd have to tend to for a few seconds. But here in the third alpha, all of this just gets thrown out of the window because entering the house gets so difficult.
God, I'm getting nervous watching this.
And is always just sitting there waiting for you. And the home itself is pretty unbalanced because by the time we get to like the third floor, he's essentially not even a part of the game anymore because he just can't reach you. This weird dynamic with the neighbor, who's supposed to be the main antagonist of the game, just makes it all less fun, honestly. And realistically, if he wasn't in the game at all, I could argue that the newer releases of the game at least would be a lot better. Especially since a lot of the game is revolved around puzzles, since of course it is a puzzle game, but trying to focus on puzzle elements while having a neighbor who only knows how to just run in your direction with hardly any way to counteract him when you're already in this home is just not any fun at all. Moving from the neighbor himself, who already single-handedly makes this game sort of a bust, I found an issue that could be even bigger. And that issue is the problem with this game's platforming and physics. They just suck. Back in the first alphas, when the game was good, something that seemed like a charm was that there were multiple ways of beating the title. One of the more alternative methods, for example, involved being able to do things like stack boxes to reach otherwise unreachable positions in the game. But when trying to do this, what people realized is that doing it is basically impossible to do without having an absolute headache because the physics were just terrible. So simply put, people just didn't try it. And that was perfectly fine because there were so many other ways to beat those various versions of the game. But fast forward to the Mega Mansion we're forced into, there's no choice. We have to parkour and combat the horrible physics of this game just to progress. We're constantly jumping around the map to get to certain positions in the game, making it unreasonably hard. And sure, a game being difficult doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, games can be challenging, hard to master, and so on. But the horrible physics don't motivate me to want to keep playing and get inside the basement. They just make me want to turn the game off. One of the worst examples of these parkour elements actually happens in something called the nightmare sequences of the game, which, if you didn't know, were supposed to be extra minigames to unlock abilities that would help us on our journey through the basement. But one of those game modes in particular is all about parkour. Jump around through a pantry, fly on paper planes, but don't fall off because then you'll have to do it all over again. If this just looks like a nightmare, trust me, it is. By the way, another thing about the gameplay that entirely ruins it for me is the puzzles. I haven't talked much about the puzzles in the game because for the most part they're actually fine. However,
I know, because I feel like what makes Hello Neighbor is the puzzle aspect, right? And I think they went about the puzzles in a really creative way. Like, it's not typically what you see in other games, but I know that was a big critique as well, especially from MatPat. If y'all ever watch MatPat play this game, and I'll get more into that after the video too, because that whole history behind, you know, Hello Neighbor and MatPat, and
tying back into the game being unnecessarily hard in Alpha 3, the puzzles in this game just make no sense. We're talking things like setting up a birthday party for a bunch of mannequins, and there's also a puzzle where we find a picture of a room, and then we have to go and replicate what the room looked like by putting all the items in with it.
Really?
These puzzles are so hard, not because it makes your brain think, but because it makes your brain not know what the hell to do at all. If you beat this game without a walkthrough, I commend you, because I don't know how anybody else did, but it's just another example to show that tinyBuild was trying to make this game more difficult by just making it unfun. Anyway, the largest and most annoying issue of all is of course going to be this game's unbelievable amount of bugs. I would normally categorize this part of the video by every single version of the game, because usually from the pre-alpha to the final version, the bugs and glitches should improve over time, but that's the exact problem that this game faced. They didn't. Like, not at all. In fact, since the homes kept getting bigger and more complicated, you could definitely argue that they got worse. Like, a lot worse. The bugs throughout this game were entirely unavoidable, and most of them ended up entirely ruining the experience. There's the small bugs, if you can even call them that include physics issues, crawling through the map, animations, and other non-crucial things being bugged out, but then there's the game-breaking bugs. Our buddy the neighbor, as mentioned, doesn't often show up in the game since we spend most of our time out of his reach until we try to leave, where he proceeds to eat our faces off. But sometimes you'll notice that you haven't seen or heard from the neighbor in a while, even while you're downstairs. Well, that's the case until you start checking some of the nearby walls that he's got himself stuck in. Yep, the neighbor gets stuck. A lot. cars, walls, you name it, he can get stuck inside of it. But hey, honestly, at this point, with how annoyingly difficult some of these puzzles are, it's kind of a good thing. Well, that is until you consider that sometimes the puzzles get a bit too hard. And by that, I mean impossible. Because oftentimes, key parts of the puzzles that you need to beat the game actually end up just not spawning. So you could literally spend hours on hours completing the game just to figure out that the last mannequin or whatever that you need to beat the game simply just didn't spawn.
Oh, that
and
sucks.
What do you have to do when that happens? Well, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the map where you started. That does not sound like any fun.
tinyBuild, this is a full release game. I've restarted it twice already. Both times, that lockpick was not there.
So mechanically, this game was entirely broken. But this was something that most people were honestly aware of by the final release of the game, yet a lot of them still stuck around. And why is that? Well, I'm sure there's some people who naively hoped that this game was going to get some sort of big overhaul, fixing all the bugs in the final game and all that. But the real reason most people stuck around was because the game had a somewhat interesting story, and I don't even blame them. The best done aspect leading up to the game's release for Hello Neighbor was that there was so much mystery behind what was in the basement, and it was pretty well kept, so nobody really knew outside of vague theories. But now, with that being said, when the final game came out, it was time to finally figure out what happened in the basement, and it was confusing to say the least. When you first enter the basement, you have to use the abilities earned from the nightmare modes to progress through it, and we eventually end up reaching the end where we have to fight a giant neighbor with a house on his body, and then we have to save a smaller version of us from being killed by whatever the hell this is. And then after we finally do all of that, we wake up from our dream that we were apparently having for the entire Act 3. Nice. So yeah, the game was bad. Just really bad.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this wasn't the last Hello Neighbor game. And in fact, there were many more released after this with similar styles and gameplay, but people don't seem nearly as attracted to these games and almost seem to be intentionally avoiding their existence entirely.
Yeah.
But why is that? Well, as we know, Hello Neighbor had initially grown from many YouTubers and content creators praising it and playing it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I actually think the opposite effect has happened, and now YouTubers and content creators are the reason that so many people avoid it. And I'm gonna be honest here, I think that modern internet culture has actually made it popular to hate Hello Neighbor. The first instance of this, besides the infinite amount of memes about how garbage the game was, comes from this screenshot of the Hello Neighbor Twitter essentially begging for MatPat, one of the
hold on, go back.
Hold to hate Hello Neighbor. The first instance of this, besides the infinite amount of memes about how garbage the game was, comes from this screenshot of...
Yes, I saw this. I literally was on Twitter and I saw this when this was happening. So, yeah, tinyBuild and MatPat, I don't know what's going on between them two, but I did see this where tinyBuild was trying to entice MatPat to play Hello Neighbor 2. MatPat has historically played all of the Hello Neighbor games except for Hello Neighbor 2. And I think tinyBuild noticed this. They're trying to be like, hey, MatPat, you know, our game is out. However, like, if you guys watched MatPat play Hello Neighbor, you already know how much that game infuriated MatPat. I know, like, when he played it, like, back in the day, I think back when Stephanie was still on the couch, it was a little bit more, like, playfully angry about it, but I literally remember when he played, what was it? It was the carnival, not carnival, it was the amusement park one. It was Hello Guest, I believe, that he played on his channel. And I think this was also too back when, like, after their St. Jude's thing and he had like a shaved head and stuff like that. He was going in on the game. Like, it angered him. Like, that was the most angry I had seen him over a game in a cool minute, and I could literally see in his eyes that, like, he was never going to play that game again. And granted, when Hello Neighbor 2 came out, I was really looking forward to seeing MatPat play it, but I'm not surprised at all that he has not touched it, and that I wouldn't be surprised either if his team didn't even let him know about this. But yeah, I did see this. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't. It just is giving desperate. And yeah.
of the Hello Neighbor Twitter essentially begging for MatPat, one of the big contributors to Hello Neighbor's success in the content creator field, to make theory videos discussing their other projects. This screenshot is probably the most famous screenshot of anything Hello Neighbor related, and
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty funny. But this also started a huge wave of people bombarding Hello Neighbor for what it is, especially after what it once was.
And real quick, because I don't know if he's going to touch on it, but also shortly after this happened, MatPat made a game theory. And you know how MatPat is, he's not going to name names, right? But he made a game theory about how a certain indie developer that's very, very popular was sending him like emails and stuff like that about him making theories about their games and accusing him of having someone on the inside because they seem to get everything right, and how is that possible? And some people suspected it was security breach, but I honestly don't think it's security breach, even though the descriptions line up perfectly with security breach and Steel Wool. I honestly think he might have low-key been talking about tinyBuild, especially because it was happening around the time that this tweet went out. So yeah, it's a mess.
This was in April of 2020, and around this time, me along with a lot of other people would actually end up creating a couple videos talking about this game retrospectively in its own negative light.
Yeah.
Now let me get this clear, I don't think I started the trend of hating on this game, it's been done for years and years, but I do think I might have unintentionally made it worse. Because after this point, more and more people began to talk about this game negatively, and I was even emailed once by one of the creators of these hating on Hello Neighbor videos saying that I directly inspired their video. And while I'm glad my video may have started a conversation for other people to give their own opinions on the game, I honestly think that these videos, along with all the other controversies, have progressively snowballed in recent time and have led to this game being a bit overhated in my opinion. Some people are even calling it out for being a copy of the Five Nights at Freddy's formula. And I mean, they would be right. Similar to FNAF, Hello Neighbor was a game that targeted children in horror, used gameplay YouTubers to help it grow, and focused heavily on the lore aspect while doing it.
I mean, here's the thing, like, yes, a lot of horror games now, they are kind of copying the formula of FNAF. It's become a very popular formula because it's a formula that works. But I wouldn't say that Hello Neighbor is copying FNAF. I think they have completely different mechanics, completely different stories, completely different just everything. So yeah, I don't see the correlation between FNAF and Hello Neighbor.
But I don't even really think that's a bad thing, and then again, that same thing could be applied to, like, any other indie horror game.
Right.
So take that for what you will, but regardless, this new wave of hate among the YouTube community that once held this game up to where it was, may have actually brought the game deep down into its own grave. And while the team desperately tries to save this game with sequels and spin-offs, the reputation of the game may already be tarnished. And with that being said, it seems like we may have found out who the coffin in the neighbor's home actually belonged to.
Okay, that was cool. But yeah, this was a really well made video. I think it's starting to go to the next one, so I just paused it right here. But yeah, it's really unfortunate to see Hello Neighbor just take that downwards turn, and just see them just, I don't want to say fail, because I mean, I really think they had something going, and I think that they have a really good concept. It's just execution. They just haven't been executing these games well. These games haven't been in, like when the games get released, right? Like as the person said, like they haven't been released in good condition, right? There's a bunch of bugs. There's mechanics that don't work. And then of course again, like the marketing. I think the marketing is, I think, what made Hello Neighbor what it is in terms of, it being well known in the gaming community. And so I think that they needed to keep up that momentum going into Hello Neighbor 2. And I think they probably needed to maybe go the Fall Guys route, where, Fall Guys, it's pretty obvious that they paid a couple of big YouTubers to play some of their newer seasons to keep it in front of people's eyes and to keep the hype up. And I really think that I don't know if they did. I don't know if Hello Neighbor or tinyBuild or whoever's working on it now, I don't know if they did reach out to certain YouTubers and maybe offer them some type of compensation or whatever the case may be to promote their games. and then these YouTubers were just like, yeah, no, I'm not interested. I don't know. But yeah, I think that, you know, that is part of their downfall. Not only the negativity from the community, but also just the lack of execution and the lack of marketing. Yeah, it's really unfortunate because, you know, I was really looking forward to Hello Neighbor 2, and I know it's out. Like, I know the game is out. But there just isn't any hype or excitement about it. And, you know, I also don't know if it adds anything to the story. I mean, I'm sure it does, but I don't know. It's just really, really unfortunate. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this whole situation in the comments down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys give it a big thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video.